Hello, Rick here, pining for a vacation. With the recent videos looking into the recreational side of Star Trek, it would no doubt be a bit of an oversight to not touch on the jewel of holiday destination spots, the primary pleasure planet, the home of horga'hn, Risa. This video is focused on the planet and its functions as a resort world, more so than the culture of its people. I'll save that for an index episode if there's enough there. First up, the planet itself is located in the same space sector as Starbase 12, which is just over 90 light-years from Sol. The system, often just called the Risa system, is the Epsilon Ceti binary star system. The planet Risa is the second in the system and it has 2 moons, although other stories mention it as having 3. By the 23rd century, this was deep within Federation territory and a UFP member world. In real life, the Epsilon Ceti system is 98 light-years away from us and actually is a binary star system. The 2 suns are of different types as far as we can tell from this range. One, the primary, is definitely an F-type main sequence star, about 1.4 times the size of our own sun, and the second is a little harder to verify, but appears to be a G-type, the same size as Sol. This combination makes a habitable zone possible, so with luck there's a perfectly temperate and beautifully lush tropical planet over there that we can visit with our soon-to-be-built faster-than-light drives. No? Too optimistic? Never mind then. The planet itself has a gravity of somewhere between 0.9 and 1 Earth standard and a very, very temperate M-class atmosphere with a lot of vegetation and expansive oceans. The majority of these land masses are broken up into island chains, and the oceans are generally shallower than Earth's. There are also extensive cave systems and dormant volcanoes that dot its peninsulas and islands. The climate has very little variation, being tropical all year round and in both hemispheres, and averaged at 28 degrees Celsius. However, this is all a fabrication, well, mostly a fabrication. I mentioned that Risa itself is covered in island chains, caverns and dormant volcanoes, and this is because it was, or rather should be, a very tectonically unstable planet. It is naturally a generally tropical climate, however it is far from calm. Rather, in its natural state, it is very temperamental. A wide and complex network of both weather control grids and seismic stabilizers maintain the controlled environment. Risa in its past had frequent tropical storms, heavy rainfall and powerful winds. It also had frequent and violent earthquakes from its high levels of tectonic activity, which also explains the network of underground caves and volcanoes. Given the large oceans, it's also likely that the earthquakes would have resulted in frequent tidal waves. It's also worth mentioning that with 2 moons, one looking to be larger than our lunar, the tides would also be more powerful. Despite all this volatile activity, life flourished on the world amid its rainforests, including the native species, the Risians, which look pretty much identical to humans. Because Star Trek. They follow a philosophy of giving, celebration and recreation, and have an entire culture centred around those sort of principles. This extends to visitors to their world too, not simply their own populace. Eventually, the Risians achieved a level of technological advancements to implement a weather control grid and create their seismic stabilizers that tamed the capricious crust. Over the generations, the Risians continued to expand their control of the planet itself, and word spread of this tropical planet and its benevolent locals. It was not long before others began to frequent the planet for relaxation, which was just fine with the Risians, as it brought in trade and prosperity from other worlds. The governing body of Risa was called the horga'hn and maintained control of its grids. This was all in place prior to the early 22nd century, as documented by pre-Federation Vulcan archives. Humans first officially visited the planet in 2152 when the Enterprise NX-01 pulled up in orbit, the furthest any human vessel had been from home in the early days of Starfleet. At this time, the weather control grid was not as all-encompassing as it is by the 24th century. Elements of the planet's violent tectonic events, of course, remain. The expansive cave networks are now often found filled with luminous flora. Natural saunas of steam pools are still fueled by underground activity, and the calderas of volcanoes now sport fields of lush flowers. In 2249, Risa joined the United Federation of Planets, which would have been a massive bonus for other Federation member worlds. Because the UFP did not use money, so I guess as long as you book in advance, shore leave on Risa is free. Obviously, Risa did not close itself off to other powers outside the UFP, as it still had frequent dealings with most others in the quadrant, including the Orion Syndicate, which attempted to get its hooks into the planet for a substantial amount of time between it joining the UFP and 2317. In this year, the criminal elements of the Orion Syndicate were removed from the planet, although that would hardly be the end of the nefarious deals conducted on the resort world. Although the strongest layer of security was simply that no weapons were permitted on the planet's surface. Alongside the extensive resorts and relaxation facilities, there are of course still facilities for the locals to actually live in, shop at and run their civilization on. The planet was even often selected to host events, conventions, lectures and so on, although that probably has something to do with all the spas and easy access to Jamaharon. Some features of Risa include the Lolnat Festival, called the Festival of the Moons, which was taken during the summer months on an annual basis. Garlantha was a cliff face that actually shifted when it was climbed, leading for a greater challenge. Temtibi Lagoon was one of many such idyllic spots, as well as the less natural water parks and amusements. They even operated their own interplanetary cruise ships called the Risa Express, which was a cruise star liner that took people to Risa as its destination. Of course, there was also the Jamaharon rite, which is not directly described, but it is a rite that can occur at any time there are willing participants, and the signal for those looking to engage was to openly display the horga'hn. This little statue was the Ryzen idol of sexuality, so I'm sure you could figure out the rest for yourself. But unfortunately, YouTube is too pure and innocent for me to describe it further. By the mid-2300s, the planet was populated by just under 3 billion Rusians, with over 1 million guests visiting at any one time, and the weather grid had near complete control over the biomes of the planet. The level of manipulation they have over the planet's climate does raise some questions, however. Surely a planet of hurricanes, storms and earthquakes would have evolved an ecosystem to adapt to this, and although seizing control of the elements was good for the Rusians, how did the environment fare? Unless they also kept an eye on their fellow native flora and fauna and maintained it with a gradual adaptation or something? I can only assume that they manipulate the environment in a way to allow storms where necessary and bring rainfall where it was needed to avoid drought. It actually gives me a weird vibe, the notion that this paradise of a planet is in fact merely a controlled illusion in the hands of a people who now have complete control over their environment from the skies to deep within the mantle. They literally shaped their world, and I can only hope that the Rysians do so with a cautious hand, and that benevolence they extend to those who bring in tourism was also extended to the ecosystem. There was a similar mindset from a party called the New Essentialists movement, however their acts escalated from destabilising the weather grid to attempting to disable the seismic stabilisers, which would have spelled disaster for all the planet's inhabitants and guests in 2373. Fortunately, they did not complete their latter action, but they did succeed in damaging the planet's reputation a bit when they took down the weather grid, resulting in a reassertion of the planet's natural rainfall levels, torrential downpour. In essence, though, that is the planet Risa, a world renowned for its fun activities, resorts and stunning natural beauty, which is in fact artificially maintained like a photoshopped image. What is your opinion on Risa? I kind of think the planet in the 24th century's gone a little far with its climate-controlled biome, but who knows in truth. We only ever see the barest glimpses into the planet. Thanks for watching this summary of Risa. It's a world I've wanted to talk on for a while, because although Earth has a climate control grid, Risa has this weird, commercialised paradise vibe to it that I can't shake. I'll see you next time for another lore video, and until then, I've been Rick. Thank you and goodbye.